Welcome everyone, and thank you for being with us for tonight's webinar for adoptive parents. My name is Kim King. I'm one of the adoptive family coordinators here at Lifetime. I have the pleasure of co-hosting with Libby Deniston, who has set up our adoptive father panel for us today, and we're really excited to spend some time with these men and just uncover their feelings and thoughts and advice and answer the questions that are on your minds as well. So as Libby said, feel free to start typing in your questions. As she said in the sound check, type in your questions in the info box or questions box, and we will be happy to get to as many of those as we can. If you are new to Lifetime, I'm going to cover some basic housekeeping for contact. You can reach us by phone at 1-800-923-6784. You can fill out your free application online at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. I would say that it's never too early to fill out the application so that we can get to work answering your questions and helping to guide you along in making informed decisions for your possible future in adoption or your definite future in adoption. Either way, go ahead and fill out that application. It's at lifetimeadoption.com/apply, and you are not making any obligation in filling that out. You're just saying, we're here, we're wondering about adoption, what do you have to say, you know, what information can you share with us? And we will have questions for you as well. The other thing that you should do is join us on Facebook at facebook.com/open.adoption. We have ongoing conversations on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/open.adoption. There are all kinds of people on our Facebook page, from adoptive parents in waiting to adoptive parents already parenting, birth moms, adoptees, adoption professionals. So there's a lot going on there, so I would encourage you to become an observer and hopefully chime in as well about your thoughts, feelings, and questions regarding any conversation we have on our Facebook page. It's a great little healthy community, a great way to stay plugged in and positive. Another way to stay plugged in is through these webinars, and we have our website where you can go and listen to the recordings. That's adoptionwebinar.com. That's adoptionwebinar.com, and you are welcome to go check that out and browse around all the different topics that we have. If you have a question you'd rather email us, perhaps it's more related to your personal circumstances or your place in your adoption journey or infertility journey, feel free to email us. You can email adopt, ADOPT, at lifetimeadoption.com. Call us, Facebook us, fill out your application, however you'd like to get in touch. We'd love to connect with you, and thank you for being with us for Lifetime's webinar this evening. Libby, thank you for getting everything set up for us.
Great, thanks, Kim. I know there was a lot of information there, but just remember, if you don't know who to contact, you can always call someone at Lifetime and we'll get you to the right person. So
that's right.
I think, well, number one, this is great timing to hear from the adoptive dads because June is Father's Day month. And actually, this webinar was sort of inspired by one of our guests, Ryan. His wife has shared on a couple of our webinars previously, and he said, hey, tell her it would be great, you know, to have a father's webinar, and I'd be happy to come on. So we took him up on his offer, and then we contacted another previous webinar guest, Sean, because he was so candid, and honestly, both Ryan and Laura's webinars and Sean and Charlene's webinar have been referenced by other families that Lifetime has helped since they broadcasted those webinars before. And so I think that tonight will be really quick moving. We'll probably speed through this hour, and that there will be a lot of great insights and just candid conversation happening. So we really want to encourage your questions, because this is an opportunity to ask another adoptive parent, in particular an adoptive dad, for his unique experience, but also you know, no matter where you are at in the process, that you have the chance, whether you're an adoptive dad-to-be or a mom-to-be, it always helps to hear from other adoptive parents who moved through the process recently, and to, you know, get a little hope and encouragement knowing if it worked for them, it can work for you, and then learn some tips along the way. So, gentlemen, Ryan and Sean, thank you for being here tonight.
Absolutely. I'm very pleased to be here.
Happy to be here.
So I have pictures tonight, and I will try and keep up. But I thought it would be good if we could just start a little bit with a brief introduction. So, Sean, let's start with you. Just how you and your wife came to adoption, how long ago that happened, just a little bit about you.
A little bit about. Well, my beautiful wife Charlene and I, really we wanted to have kids right away, and I'll keep this brief. We basically lost 5 pregnancies, and it was gut-wrenching. And our doctor had finally said, we had our fertility clinic, had finally said, you know, it's kind of enough. And sorry if I sound a little disjointed or I've got tears in my eyes right now, kind of going through it. We had gone, and it was sort of funny. I guess I can say this. Of all things, we were watching TV and launched onto a Dave Thomas Foundation special. And that was kind of the impetus for us to start looking at adoption, and we started talking to a few people and looking at agencies, and anyways, Lifetime was the fit for us. It's the one we felt comfortable, and it just gelled. Ladies are great. Anyways, it just all fit, and we were in waiting for about 2 years. Go into more of that later, and literally 3 years ago this Saturday, we were at the hospital where our daughter Audrey was born, and that's our cute little girl right there.
I can't believe it's already been almost 3 years. We were just talking before the webinar, and I like to share this just because I think sometimes when you either haven't started the adoption process yet, or if you're actually waiting right now, it can feel like eternity before you get to that dream you keep, you know, focusing on. And what will it be like to welcome that child and to start our lives with that baby? And then what we love at Lifetime is that we get to hear from some of the adopted parents, and they send us photos, updates, or certainly when we catch up for webinars. And we were just talking before the webinar tonight about how quickly that time goes once you adopt. And I hope that in a way, I know that for a lot of you who are waiting, you might hear that and think, well, that's all great, but it's going slow as molasses now. But truly, it's amazing to look at the pictures of these families and just feel as though they've always been this way, even though it was just such a short time ago that they came together. So, so hopefully you'll find some of that encouragement tonight too. But Ryan, let's hear from you a little bit just about what brought you to adoption, and a little bit about your family.
I'll be straight up and say I'm the guy who was not cool with adoption from the get-go. I'll be that guy. So my wife and I got married. We were 21. We were pretty young. And after we had been married probably, I don't know, 6 years, we had been trying and doing the deal to try to, you know, grow our family, and nothing was happening. We saw a fertility specialist. Turns out my wife had some stuff and down there. I don't understand how all that works, but it just wasn't going to work. And so Laura approached me about adoption, and I just said, nope, not interested, don't want to do that, let's move along. And that from about, I don't know, the time I said that, it took probably a year or close to a year for me to, I can only attribute it to God changing my heart. I think that's the only way I can explain it. So we started, once I finally came around and said that it was something that I would be willing to look into, man, we found Lifetime, got plugged in, did our home study. Literally every domino fell into place, and I think it was, I'm going to mess the timeline up if I even attempt it, but somewhere around mid-2014 we got everything buttoned up, and I think we turned in all of our stuff to Lifetime in September, and we waited about 2 months, and then we got a call one day that there was a birth mom that wanted to talk to us, and we talked to her on a Monday. They called back and said on Tuesday that she wanted to match with us, and also that the baby would be born a month later, which would have been around Christmas. Oh, except that the baby came 3 weeks early, and so the baby was born on Sunday, like 5 days later. So we literally found out about our daughter on Tuesday or Monday, and she was born on Sunday. And so we kind of went from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. But I said this earlier. I would rate adoption as 10 out of 10. Would definitely do it again. It's been the most rewarding and incredible thing that I've ever done in my life. It's been really fantastic.
Thank you. Well, and I appreciate that you started off talking about your history personally of not being on the same page as Laura with choosing adoption. But I think even when two parents are, let's say, well, I'm okay with adoption, sometimes when they're ready to start still varies. So I'm interested to hear from both of you what you might tell another couple where one is ahead of the other, or how to approach the topic of adoption when you feel like one is still wanting to try and conceive, or maybe even just give up and have a future without that child. What would you tell other couples who might identify with either, we've come through so many losses and we're not sure that adoption is the right path right now, or someone who says, I'm just not interested in adoption, period?
I would say the main thing is to be patient. If you're the reluctant spouse, just be patient with each other. And if you're if you're the guy and you're wanting to convince your wife to go down that road and she's resistant, just be patient. Like I said, it took me almost a year probably to get to that point. I think just be encouraging. Just be loving, be understanding. But I think patience is probably the key here.
Yeah, I think we kind of had the opposite situation where I wouldn't say we were both on board right away. We were concerned. I guess Shar was a little bit behind where I was. My father had been adopted, and when we started talking about it seriously, we started looking at everybody in our life, and we were quite amazed at how many people in our lives had been touched by adoption. And that sort of eased the way in for us to move forward. One of the things that I think is important is we had been through the fertility thing for a number of years, and financially that straps you pretty quickly. I describe it as you just bought a Ferrari and you pull it off the parking lot and it gets totaled. Now you survive, but you don't have any insurance on the car. So now you're looking at adoption in some cases. So it really is a leap of faith to put everything in. And then, as you all know, sometimes getting all of your stuff together seems like a daunting task, but it really helps you get everything in order and gives you a good direction to where you want to go. And you just have to be, this sounds painful, but you have to be brutally honest with yourself and with your spouse about where you're going with this and what you want to do. And it ends up being, as Ryan said, it's a 10 out of a 10. We've actually been talking about doing something again in the future. And I hope we're in the position, I hope we feel that way as well.
Thank you. We had a question from the audience. I want to get back to the question. when we talk about, okay, you got to the time when you actually, a baby's born and you're having to travel, did either of you take a lot of time off? Did you take paternity leave? Did you stay out of state the whole time? Or, because sometimes men will go back and wife will stay with baby while they wait for clearance to take baby home. So what was that like for you? We had a great question here just about how much time did you take off to bond with the new baby?
John, you want to take it first?
Yeah, we didn't. We were fortunate. Our birth mother actually ended up living literally 2 hours north of us, in state. So it was actually a relatively easy process. It was say the tearful goodbyes, put Audrey in the car, strap her up, take a deep breath, and drive the safest and slowest I think I've ever driven in my life to get home. And then it was, it was amazing coming home. I remember someone had put a stork and there were balloons and all kinds of stuff. And then we had the wait period, which was nerve-wracking again. But after everything had settled, Shar and I both took time off to spend time. We took advantage of the family leave. We both did that for a couple weeks, and then we eased back in. Shar took more time off than I did. She took several weeks more, but I went back to work. And at that point, with the young one, you're helping out. You just don't sleep. That part doesn't change.
Ryan, I know you have a unique story.
I was going to say.
While I just wanted to kind of preface it, because while some of you may have heard Ryan speak a little moment ago saying, well, we only really waited with Lifetime 2 months, they had an out of usual different kind of wait once she came. So I would love to hear you recount that.
I like telling this story because it's fun for us to look back on just what we went through and to see where we are now versus what we got into. So like I said, we found out about Ava on Tuesday, and birth mom is from Los Angeles, and we live in Louisiana. And so I don't know how familiar you all are with the globe, but that's not close by. And so we hopped on a plane. We got the call late Sunday night at about 6 p.m. Central. We hopped on a plane 6:30 a.m. the next day, flew to Los Angeles, and by, I don't know, around noon, we were at the hospital meeting with the birth mom. So everything was hunky-dory from that standpoint. Initially, when we arrived, we showed up at the hospital, met our daughter, cried, took pictures, called everybody we knew, all that stuff, and that was probably the best day of my life. After we left to go back to our hotel, we didn't know that. I mean, nobody from the hospital had told us, sort of what to expect as far as when we could take the baby home. Baby was in the NICU, so we didn't think that we would be able to take her immediately, but we showed up the next day. They said, hey, everything's cool. Y'all can take her home. And we were like, today? And they're like, yeah, take her today. So we loaded her up, took her back to the hotel with us that night, and waited to hear back from our social worker. And in California, there's some regulation type stuff whereby the birth mom has a few days to sign the document saying that the adoption's good, everything proceed as planned, and there was some complications with that. It's just to put it lightly. We ended up having to stay in Los Angeles for a month, for 4 weeks. So we showed up in late November. We spent Thanksgiving in the Hilton. I forgot the name of the little town. We stayed in the little Homewood Suites. We spent Thanksgiving there. We had some delicious Thanksgiving takeout, at the hotel, and my wife's mom and dad flew out to spend a few days with us. But yeah, we sat in that hotel room for a month with a newborn baby, and it was not fun, guys. I mean, it was being new parents. We didn't know how to calm a screaming baby at 2 o'clock in the morning. Oh, also you've got neighbors on both sides of you who are probably going to be mad that you woke them up in the middle of the night. They probably have important things to do. And so, I mean, it was really stressful. I'll just be straight with you. I mean, it was hard. But you know, we made it through. Laura and I got to spend time together, just the two of us with our daughter, the first month of her life, you know, in a tiny hotel room in a suburb of Los Angeles. And she and I have a sort of a unique situation whereby we knew that she was going to quit her job and be a stay-at-home mom when we had kids, and so, you know, she called her employer from the Houston airport telling them that she wouldn't be coming back to work. Everybody had already known that, so it wasn't a big deal. And my job, I'm in sales, and so I worked remotely anyway. So I was able to work some from the hotel. I didn't have to take time off or anything, but I realized that's not a common thing. So you know, that was good for us. We were able to stay out there. I didn't have to fly back home and go back. I imagine that would be quite difficult. But finally, after we had been in the hotel for a month, they called, our attorney called, and we had everything buttoned up. They called us and told us to hop on a plane. So they called at about noon, and at like 3:30, I think we had already showed up at LAX and booked it out of there.
Do you think, we had a question here for each of you, just said, you know, what was the most difficult part of the process? Since your wait to adopt was relatively short, would you say that was probably the most difficult part, was just the longer than average time to get home to your comfort zone and your familiar places?
Yeah, without a doubt. It was, you know, I think it would have been different had we been able to be at home, because I like sleeping in my own bed, I'll just be honest. And I like my dog and my couch too, and I could just imagine that easing into being a parent when you have no kids, going from 0 to 1, I can imagine that would have been a lot easier. Yeah, it was hard, I'm not going to lie, but it worked out. I mean, sitting where we are today, a year and a half out, I kind of think I wouldn't do it any other way, to be honest.
Yeah, we
oh, go on, sorry.
Yeah, we kind of had the sort of the opposite. He's right about California. That's where we are, and our birth mother had signed a waiver, so we were lucky enough to have the little one after 48 hours. However, we left the hospital on a Friday, and it turns out it was 48 business hours. So we did have a little bit of a wait. That was sort of nerve-wracking, but at least we were in our home. And this is what's really cool. Ryan and I were so opposite on so many things, or had opposite experiences, is a better way to put it. We were a family in waiting for almost 2 years, and that was the most difficult part. I remember we were approaching the 2-year mark, and we were starting to get nervous and thinking things wouldn't happen. And both my wife and I work, and we kept busy with that. And you know, we listened to all the seminars and kept active with Lifetime as we could. And we had a group of friends from church that were going through similar situations, not necessarily with adoption, but trying to get families going, and so we had good support there. But I think I was probably the one that cracked first, and it was just I had almost given up. And I remember sending a text to the pastor of our church and just telling him I'm done. What's going on, and throw up your hands and whatever. That for me was the toughest part, And then for me to send something like that is just crazy, because that's not the kind of normal person I am. And it was sort of interesting, because once we did that and we kind of said, all right, let's be comfortable. Sharon and I talked it out, and this is where we were. And our pastor came over and talked to us, and calmed me down and whatnot. And we sort of accepted that as, let's go on and move forward. And we started going into what if, because of the 2 years and what we would do. And then it wasn't a couple weeks later we got our call. That started the process. So for us, it was really the being in waiting.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just sort of on this topic, because you both had spoke about your journeys to adoption included being told, a biological child is not likely possible. And we had a great question come up from one of the dads to be in our audience. It just says, how did you cope with the loss of not being able to have a child that shared your genes? And then what is it like to think back on those feelings you had then, to have that hindsight now that you've gotten to this place as a dad?
Well, I remember I remember sitting in the doctor's office when that one came down, and really my first thought was actually for my wife and her health. The whole process was really starting to compromise her health, and I was concerned for her more than anything. I have to admit, I did feel a little bit of disappointment, but it wasn't in the sense of, how would I say, I was disappointed, but I wasn't upset. It was just one of those things. And then when we started talking about adoption, and we really started, again, we had those hard conversations, and we started looking at our family, and we're going, all right, maybe our genes really aren't the best to carry on. And, look at our uncles and, relatives and things like that. And so that was sort of added a little bit of levity to it. And now it doesn't, every once in a while I think about that, yes. And it's sort of like, okay, well, you know what, this is the hand we've been dealt, and it's okay. And in one sense it doesn't matter, because y'all are looking at my beautiful daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for us,
Brian, I know you spoke a little bit to that, but I do think that whether or not you're on board with adoption, there's still that loss of what many couples never have to face, the idea of, is this even an option for us?
yeah, and for us, my reasons, my thoughts are very similar to Sean's. My wife has a little heart defect that she's always been concerned about not being able to maintain a pregnancy and not be able to deliver. And I never really thought about it until we started with the adoption process. And I'm like, you know what? I think this was probably God's design for us from the get-go. Maybe that's the reason why she has that heart defect in the first place, was to sort of make a kind of a warning sign that, hey, this might not work out, you guys. You may want to consider something else. But you know what? I thought about that before. Like, yeah, my kid's probably not going to look like me. Is that a big deal? And yeah, for me, I kind of thought, yeah, it is kind of a thing at first, and it doesn't matter to me anymore. My daughter has darker skin than I do, and her hair is curly, and she got a lot of hair, by the way. But I wouldn't change one thing, and I can speak for my wife. She wouldn't change one thing either. So there is a little bit of that feeling of loss that yeah, it would have been nice, but at the end of the day, man, I wouldn't trade that little girl for anything in this world.
And so Ava is 18 months old, and Audrey, Sean's daughter, is going on 3. So what was really fun was listening to these two dads before the webinar talk about all the little things of the stages that their girls are in. And maybe you could even speak to the point of just being dads of girls. Was there anything that sort of shocked you in thinking, I never thought I would think about these things, or I never thought I'd be able to do this? What would you tell the other dads who might be thinking, well, since I'm adopting, I get a choice in, whether it's a boy or a girl, I get more say. What would you say to those guys that maybe are just, so sweaty palmed about the possibility of a girl?
Dude, I'm sorry, I didn't want to jump in front of Sean, but it kind of sparked something. I mean, you see from my picture, I'm 6'1", I weigh about 260. I'm a big dude. I'm an engineer. I build stuff. I get dirty. I work on cars. I make a mess. I do all kind of, I power lift. I do manly stuff all the time. But dude, me and Ava will have one heck of a fun tea party. I mean, we sit down in the middle of the floor and we have tea parties. We watch Peppa Pig. I know the Peppa Pig theme song. Peppa Pig might be my favorite TV show. I'll just be honest. And we play with dolls, and we do the stuff that she wants to do, and I eat it up. I never thought I would be a girl dad. I guess you just don't ever think about that, but yeah, somebody's got to be a girl dad at somewhere. Half the people are girls, so I've had an absolute blast. Yeah, it's been awesome.
My first thought is run. It's kind of funny because Char and I, that was, when you think you got this choice, and it's a very real consideration. And she actually was leaning towards a boy, and I was leaning towards a girl. And I really can't explain a whole lot why. It's just sort of the way we were kind of going with it, so we decided we'd leave it open. Yeah, so I'm not a small guy either. I surf. I love the beach. Lifetime people know I like driving cars in different events. I'm a musician. We have a lot of fun, and you know what? She's right there with me. It's so much fun. Put her in her little Doc Martens and have her go. We don't do it as much as I'd like. Listen to music. If Char's listening, I'm going to be in trouble for that one. But we have a good time, and having a girl is just sort of cute. So, yeah, wearing a tutu is kind of it's kind of liberating, and But with a girl too, you can't be shocked when you walk in the door and you see your dog in a tutu as well. That's sort of the funny part. Or she wants to, pretend to put on makeup, or wants to pick out her clothes now. That's kind of important to her. You just roll with it. I think the toughest part, though, is just how wrapped around her little finger you become as a dad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, if she wants Peppa Pig, oh, yeah, we're watching Peppa Pig.
Yeah. And there is no feeling in this world like walking in the door. You've been at work all day, tired, you come in, and the first thing you hear is, "My daddy!" And she runs and wants you to pick her up. I mean, you can't buy that.
No, and then they get a few more words. It's, just out of the blue, she'll be doing something like, I don't know, torturing the dog, and you just kind of look at her and you're going, "What's going on?" And she just looks at you and goes, "I love you, Daddy," and that's it. You're melted. You're toast.
Now, both of your girls are pretty young. I'm sure that the talk about adoption is still pretty basic. But I would love to hear your perspectives, because usually we hear more from the women on how they start introducing their child's story and your whole family's adoption story so that it's a comfortable topic. Do either of you have a role in helping your child understand how you came together through adoption?
Yeah, I mean, we've got several books that we read to her. And the big thing for us is, there's all different kinds of families, and the things that hold the families together, it's love. God brought these families together, and that's just what they are. But Shar and I, as our conscious approach is, it's really no big deal. I mean, if you look at when I'm out with her, if I don't tell people she's adopted, no one has any idea. And we just treat it as no big deal. So if people get curious and ask specifically about our story or something like that, then we have no problem telling them. A lot of times people will say, well, when they'll go into it a little further, and it's sort of fun to say, well, how long have you had her? And you say, well, we were at the hospital when she was born. I mean, you can't have her much longer than that. Shar was actually in the delivery room. So that's really our approach is really, it's no big deal. It's just another way to a family, and that's the way we're actively trying to encompass this whole thing. I guess it's just we don't consider it a big deal at all.
Yeah, to your point, I forget that Ava's adopted. Real talk, I just don't even think about it. We'll see people at the grocery store that we haven't seen in a while, and they might ask, well, where'd she get all that hair? And I'm like, well, she has dark hair like her daddy. But if people ask, I'm an open book. I tell people everywhere I go if they ask. I mean, I don't care who they are. I'll tell our story. I don't care. And Laura's the same way, because you never know. And look, we've had several people just around in our community who have come to us privately and said, hey, we're considering adoption. Would you guys be willing to sit down with us and talk about it? In fact, we had one couple that we met for lunch who ended up they just had their baby was born just a few months ago. I'm at a loss for where they live and who they are. I don't remember, but I know that they went through Lifetime. So you just never know, what kind of connections you're going to make with other people. So yeah, I mean, it's fun to share your story, and it's fun. As far as telling Ava that she's adopted, I mean, she can't comprehend that at 18 months, but it's not going to be a secret at my house. I'll tell her every day as from as young as she can comprehend it. The main thing is, Mommy and Daddy love you. You're our special gift from God. You're a miracle. We love you, and you're always going to be our daughter, and nothing's ever going to change that.
Hey, Ryan, I'm glad you brought that up, because Shar and I are in the same situation or similar situation. We don't have 3 months go by where we're not put in touch with families that are either in waiting or they're thinking about adoption, just so they can connect with us and get an idea of what's going on. Right. And it's amazing how many people you actually touch. And one of the things that goes back to when we were thinking about it was good friends of mine from when literally I was about Audrey's age, two twins, they were adopted. And that was one of the questions, is how did they deal with that? And knowing they were adopted and reconnecting with their birth mother, of all things, a few years back. And it was amazing how clear they were when going, well, my mom's my mom.
Right.
Yeah, I got a birth mother, but that's not my mom. My mom is my mom, and that will never change. So it's sort of just kind of...
I love that you brought that up. Well, because we had a great question that just said, did you ever not want to have an open adoption? And I do think that it's important to talk about even how you got to the point where you understood what open adoption could look like, and how you decided this is right for our family versus, say, foster care or international. But Sean, I would love for you to continue, because I also have these photos from your previous webinar, because you did have time to get to know Audrey's birth parents and spend time together, and even talking about this photo here of you with a guitar. What is what does open adoption look like to you now, but what did you used to think about it?
Well, we didn't. I would go with what we thought about it. That's easy because open adoption for us was, okay, we may have some pretty good medical records to, we don't know, we're going to see them on a regular basis, and then everything in between. And I remember meeting with, oh boy, meeting the birth parents and their families for the first time. It was really kind of a shock, because I remember that was one of the questions they had for us was, well, what about what are open adoptions about? And thinking we were the experts at it, and we didn't know, so we're still kind of trying to figure this out as we go along. And we had a couple months before, once we were matched before Audrey was born, and we had a good chance to get to, it's John and Wendy, by the way. We had a chance to meet with them several times. Char met with Wendy a couple extra times. John is a musician, he's a drummer. We actually we've had a couple of jam sessions together. Great people. We admire them both for the decisions that they made and that enabled us to be blessed with family. And we do keep in touch with them. It's not very often, but we do keep in touch. And I will admit, Char's Mama Bear comes out quite quickly when it's brought up, but and I'm a little more open. But you know what? This is kind of what I don't want to say we signed up for, but it's what our relationship is turning out to be. So we're going to go ahead and make the best of it.
So can you elaborate a little bit? Do you keep in touch often, or in these 3 years have you seen each other?
We've had probably, let's see, we've had 5. I think we've actually had 5 visits altogether, and they've been tapering off. I'm being quite candid here. It seems like they've been tapering off. At first it was kind of okay, and then it's getting a little tougher. And it's difficult when Audrey doesn't really know who they are or the relationship. She's just too young right now. So these are 2 very young people that have their whole lives ahead of them. So they've got their lives, we've got ours, and it just seems like it is tapering off just a little bit.
Isn't uncommon. Sometimes that happens just as they get comfortable with you keeping your commitment, and they're moving on with their lives too. Yeah. It may ebb and flow like that.
Exactly. And one of the first meetings we had, it was we really came to the conclusion that they just wanted to see that Audrey was safe and well cared for, that things were going good, and that was really good. So it's not. I'm going to be blunt. It's not easy for us, and I'm sure it can't be easy for them either. But again, we're going to make the best of it, and they are great people. I hear John through the grapevine about his music much more than I hear about Wendy, so it's kind of neat that way. But I'm glad they're both doing well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Ryan, I know your family has a different experience, but I would still love your perspective on what open adoption looked like before you actually had one, and then what it was like moving through that and what it looks like now.
I didn't know enough about open adoption to really have much of an opinion, other than I thought that it was probably a good thing, and just because I was uneducated as to what it looked like. Our situation is different such that our, just geographically, I'm looking at my Apple Maps thing right here, and we are 1,700 miles from our house to Camille's house. So that means that, you know what, unless one of us hops on a plane or wants to go on an overnight road trip or two-night road trip, we're not going to see each other. Now, I can't speak for my wife. I don't know where she is today with this issue. I would be more than happy. I mean, I love Camille. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, she did the bravest thing that anybody can ever do, and I have a little token of her every day that I look at. I look in her eyes. I mean, Ava has Camille's eyes and looks a lot like her in the face. And so I see Camille every day. You know, we met her. We spoke on the phone with her once or twice before Ava was born. When we were at the hospital, I had a chance to meet Camille and her mom and dad. We don't really know who Ava's birth father is. He was sort of in the picture and then not in the picture, and that's okay. We've maintained contact with Camille via email. It's been sort of hit or miss. And not to say that we don't talk with her, but the intervals have gotten, like you said, a little bit more spaced out as time has gone on, and we used to hear from her probably every 2 weeks in the early days wanting pictures, and then it turned into you know, every month or so, and then it turned into I don't know that we've heard from her in a couple of months. But you know what? As soon and I don't want to be the guy that just, you know, sends pictures, because if she's moved on and she doesn't want to continue to, you know, have to look at us, then I don't want to put her in an uncomfortable situation. But Laura and I are in agreement. If she wants contact, we'll give her as much contact as she wants, you know, within certain boundaries that Laura and I have control over. But I would be, I mean, if we wanted to set up if she came to us and said she wanted to see Ava, we would figure out a way to make it happen. Certainly not opposed to that. But it was really neat to be able to meet her and meet her mom and dad, and you know, we went in the hospital room and we prayed over them and wept with them and hugged them, and it was a really emotional day. I'm not going to cry right now. So anyway, I think.
Does that surprise you to think from where you came from? I don't even want to think about adoption. To I'm praying with my daughter's birth family, and it even still to this day will, you know, bring tears to my eyes just to imagine how moving that moment was.
Yeah, and I can only give glory to God for that, because this is not something that I did. It was but it is pretty cool. You know, it's fun to think about for sure. So yeah.
Sean, I had a question come to my mind that actually I remember being asked about before, but we have, you know, a lot of adopted moms will voice how difficult holidays or different birthday milestones will be, and since you guys waited close to 2 years, you know, you had plenty of time, like you even said, you had a breakdown saying, I'm not even sure we should keep doing this, and then shortly after you were matched. You know, did you experience those milestones or those holidays differently than your wife? And how did you, when you maybe were both having a hard time, how did you kind of help each other, you know, get back up?
I think the holiday that was toughest was Mother's Day. That was for sure. And like I said, it just hurt me so much. Sorry, I'm grabbing the tissues again. It actually hurt me so much to see her hurt, with the disappointment that you know, it was just the two of us and Ginger, our dog, because we didn't have a little one. Audrey hadn't entered our life yet, and that was very difficult. I would follow that up with Christmas. It was very rough for that reason. At the same time, we had one of our in-laws had a daughter, and her birth coincided with one of the pregnancies that we lost. And if no one thinks God doesn't have a sense of humor, this will do it. My little niece is she's actually a mini Shar, right down to the red hair and attitude. It's incredible. So the two of them kind of have a little special bond. But although we celebrated, and it's wonderful. I mean, we're taking her to SeaWorld this weekend. It really, really was almost like a slap in the face again to Shar. And those were the difficult parts of the holidays. The other, the secondary, the being and waiting, how did we get through? One of the things we honestly committed ourselves is, we were listening to the seminars, and one of the things, or the webinars, and one of the things that was a recurring theme for us was we kept hearing people weren't doing anything with their lives other than waiting for the phone call. And we purposely went and kept going with our lives. We signed up for the Drop in the Lap program, which we were hoping for. It didn't happen, but that tempered us. So, maybe we kept our vacations a little closer to home, or not so crazy where we couldn't get back. But we made that conscious effort to actually live our lives and keep going. Planning things we would do. Once we did have a child, we did not create the bedroom or anything like that. Again, that was a conscious decision. Nothing right or wrong, just a decision for us. And one of the things that had really helped is we built up a support group with people from our church, and it was actually our pastor's wives that brought several of us together that, for lack of a better expression, were having fertility issues. So now we've got 4 couples without kids, all trying to have kids desperately. And fast forward now almost 5 years, we're actually all going on a Disney cruise together with kids that range in age from 3 to 6. We've got 1 adopted, one's an IVF. We've got we've got a surrogate donor situation, and we've got an oops. So I don't see how you can. I think we got the bases covered on all of those. So, anyways, we just made a purpose of having a purposeful life during that wait, other than the adoption.
Thank you for sharing that. We had several people chime in, actually men and women, just saying, it's so validating to hear that. And then from both of you, the comments you've been talking about, sort of the before and after adoption, and it's really been reassuring for our families in the audience to hear that, what they might feel like today, maybe doesn't go away, but that it's, it's just so much better than you imagine once you bring that child home. And I'm just really grateful for you guys sharing so candidly tonight. We really appreciate it. Ryan, what would you say? I know you were speaking earlier kind of to the women, but and you talked about how there's been people brought into your life that you just start sharing with. And honestly, I think whether you have an open adoption that's a lot of contact with a child's birth mother, sometimes these days, just even the concept of open adoption, I think, has freed adoptive parents up to just be more comfortable talking about it. What would you tell someone in our audience? Because I think even when you're waiting to adopt, sometimes you might still question, am I on the right path? Should I even be doing this? And speaking from your own experience of, getting over that hurdle and then coming into the process, what would you want to let the people know tonight before we wrap up?
Boy, what a hard question. I've always known that I wanted to be a dad, and I've always known that that I would be a good dad. I had a good dad, taught me how to be a good dad, and I knew that I had a lot of love to offer. And my wife is, my goodness, I mean, she's one of the sweetest human beings on the planet Earth. And so I knew that she had a lot to offer. Adoption gave us the vehicle to get to where we wanted to be. My wife has always said, God created her to be a mom. She doesn't really have any desire to make a career of anything. She is in her Super Bowl right now being a stay-at-home mom. And so, I wanted that for her, and it hurt me to not be able to give her what she wanted. Adoption really is the perfect, it's the perfect symbol of God's love for us. And so I know that I'm probably not answering this question very effectively.
No, you're fine. You're good.
Yeah, I just I would encourage you to just take a step. The longest journey begins with a single step. That's a proverb that somebody has said before. Just start moving that direction and start praying about it. It seems like a difficult journey, and in some ways it is, but it's the most rewarding thing that you could possibly ever do. I feel like I keep saying the same thing over and over. Like, it's so great, it's phenomenal, and it is, and it really is. And I'm sort of at a loss for how to quantify that.
I think what both of you have brought up actually reminds me of something I've heard before from the women, which was, and maybe you guys could affirm this or just share your own background, but you've each spoken to how some of the hardest times were actually when you weren't sure how to make it easier for your wife, because you knew how much she wanted to be a mom, how much she wanted to grow your family, and you were on board with that, but watching her and not being able to fix that or make it better in the moment or make it actually happen, sooner, or I think that speaks volumes, because the adoption journey, I think, is different for husbands and wives, and that part of it is, maybe you felt more of a role of, I've got to support her because she's sort of driving this forward, because sometimes it is a women-driven sort of thing. You're dealing with birth mothers. A lot of the attorneys and social workers are women, and certainly at Lifetime, all the adoption coordinators are women, so maybe, I would hope maybe there's men in the audience that would identify with that, with, yeah, I personally, I have my hard days, but the hardest days have been watching how hard this can be for my wife.
Well, I think the first thing is that Ryan and I, we're guys. We want to fix things. We see something wrong, and we want to go in and fix it. We want to make it better. And then it's our wives. We love them. We don't want them to we don't want them to hurt or want, and that's the part that's difficult. And sorry if I jumped in here, Ryan. It's I was actually the driver in our family. I was the one interviewing way back when, starting the conversation with people, interviewing the agencies, talking with the ladies at Lifetime, and you had one guy at the time. I think he was in IT, I believe. Even talked to him. And collecting the information and starting to get it going. Our portfolio, Shar took over on that. That's her thing. She loves scrapbooking, and I support that 100%. Anyway, I just totally lost my train of thought on this. It was just, yeah, sorry, it just went out the window. I can't be any more real than that.
My wife was the driver in our house, and I was the one sort of tagging along and following her lead, which is totally not characteristic for me. I'm the one. I'm like, there's a hill, let's go climb it. Let's grab our swords and go conquer this castle, and so to speak. So for me to be the follower in that case was weird. But she's the one that interviewed all the agencies and did all the research and did all the planning and did all the stuff, and I was just hanging out like, well, I guess I'm going to be a dad now, and we'll just do what you want to do, babe. And yeah, I don't know, it all happened, and it happened so fast, and by fast I mean once we signed up with Lifetime, I mean everything just sort of fell into place. But
I would say both of your experiences sort of speak to, you will find and that balance as a couple, and that not one person is doing everything, but even if it looks like they're the one checking off the list, you're still, being a support, making sure, do you have what you need, that you're still a team together, and I think that that's just different couple to couple. But Sean, I remember from your webinar, something Kim and I reference often was just even your encouragement to adoptive parents to not get discouraged about all of the paperwork, all of the things you need to check off, but rather to set a goal for day by day or week by week and just check off, just keep going and stay on top of it. And that's helped so many families. I think just hearing both of your experiences, if we could see people, I'd probably see a lot of nodding heads, like, yeah, that sounds right, I've been there, or that's kind of what we do. So, I think it's helpful to know you're not overwhelmed.
The paperwork, there's no question it's terrible. And out in California, they make it, I think, double than some other states. And I know some are just as bad. And that was the thing. It's just a matter of you mentioned teamwork, and it's just doing it together. And literally, we kind of mapped out how we were going to do it and how we were when we were going to get it done. And this is kind of a funny thing that Ryan actually triggered this. Something you said earlier reminded me of this. Is we were kind of wrapping up our paperwork, and we actually a flight got canceled, and we actually got stuck in Montana for an extra day. And with absolutely no plans. So instead of actually going out and doing something crazy or fun, we made a conscious decision that, hey, God just presented us with this little miracle of free time, which is something we don't get very often. So we sat in this restaurant/bar overlooking a beautiful river in Montana, and we just pounded out our paperwork and got it done. And everyone that came before us had told us that it'll be worth it, just get through it. And you know what? You don't even think about that anymore. It's totally worth it. And the one thing I might add is we look for big miracles all the time in our lives. And on this journey to adoption, when I look back, it's all the little miracles that made it happen.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. I think that probably would resonate with a lot of people. Just looking around at, wow, how did we get here? And certainly I hope for all of you listening tonight that when you do meet your child, that some of these things will come back to mind that you heard from these stories tonight. And you'll think, oh, I get it now. Or, okay, yes, that makes more sense. Or I remember thinking, I can't wait for that to happen, but now it's actually happening and I can totally identify. So thank you for that. That's just beautiful. We look for the big miracles, but it's the little ones that happen that got you there. Thank you both for sharing tonight. Is there anything that you want to leave before we close? I know we kind of covered a lot of ground, and we had some people in the audience just saying, this has been great. Tell them Happy Father's Day, and we love hearing that. As we wrap up, Kim, is there any questions I'm missing? I just want to make sure we get to everything before we close.
No, I mean, I think that they've touched on a lot of different things that can connect with other future adoptive dads, and that probably have a lot of future adoptive moms nodding their heads like, yes, yes, loving hearing it from the men. Especially the differing perspectives, starting out in one place and kind of ending up in a whole different new place, and giving all glory to God for that, for opening your heart and putting you where you are now. And I think it's important for adoptive dads too to recognize, like what Sean was saying about Mother's Day being hard, and the hardest thing, having to watch her in pain when you can't fix it. I think that that's something that many can connect over. I think that's a classic, thing that many couples with, if it's a husband that's more of a fixer and the wife that's more of a feeler, then that can be a challenge, and I think it's good to just validate those feelings, that you're not alone if that's what you're encountering now. So I think this webinar has been complete. Thank you both guys for being with us and bearing your hearts to us and sharing these awesome pictures. I know you guys are pretty generous with your photos, which we always cherish. Whenever I get the little albums from Shar, I'm just like, it's like a little movie time for me. Anyway, but thank you both for being with us. Yes.
I have one more thing to say, and I promise I'm going to make it short. But from a tactical perspective, two things that your families in waiting may want to know, and just a couple of things that we experienced that you might want to look out for, and then I'll shut up. The first
don't worry, you're fine.
I was under the impression that that our daughter's health insurance would be taken care of from the moment that she was born, and I had it sort of worked out with my employer, whereby when she's born we can add her to your plan, no big deal. Well, I don't know if it's a Louisiana deal. Our branch of Blue Cross Blue Shield refused to add her to my family plan. Ava was born. She was on Medi-Cal until the end of December of 14. Beginning January 1, she didn't have health insurance, and so no matter what I could do, they would not add her to my family plan. So we had some doctor bills, and she had a little. She had to have an echo on her heart, so we ended up paying for all that out of pocket. For she wasn't covered for January at all. I was able to buy her a plan, just an individual plan, to kick in February, but they just wouldn't do it. So that's one thing to watch out for. And the other thing is our adoption is still not final. It's taken, and this is purely on the Los Angeles County court system. But we have a court date. It's for July. But it was supposed to be done. They said it would take no longer than a year. Well, here we are, a year and a half. It's almost over, and not that there's any chance that Ava could go back to her birth mom or anybody could take her away from us. It's not that. It was just it's been. I mean, it exacerbates my wife more than it does me. Just the waitings. Well, what if? I mean, she can come up with 1,000 what if scenarios, but just look out for that. And if it does happen, be patient. It'll finally get closed out. And ours is finally coming to an end. So I just wanted to throw those two things out there. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no. Oh, you're
no, I was rattling and giving you time to see if there was anything else you wanted to add. I was going to totally leave it on you guys.
Oh, that actually, Ryan, that's perfect because that's where we were,
Yeah.
and I had forgotten about that already.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that's
Something about those little adoring eyes that make you forget about things like insurance, right?
Yeah, totally.
true. And those are things sometimes you can plan ahead, find out hypothetically when your insurance would pick up, but sometimes you also can't predict those. And like Ryan said, you just have to be patient. I would suggest even just keeping a list of your questions so you can make sure you go back and say, wait, we talked about this, or I forgot to ask this one. Because even though you have your baby home, there's still details to take care of and stay on top of. And Ryan, I almost kind of giggle thinking, well, it went fast on the front end, and so maybe this is sort of your wait here that you never had.
That's exactly right.
Thank you both so much. And if any of you have questions after tonight's webinar or feedback, or I saw a lot of comments here that said we would love to hear from more dads. So if you have feedback like that, please let your coordinator know, or you can even write to me. My email is libby@lifetimeadoption.com. And again, like Kim mentioned at the beginning of tonight's webinar, if you're with Lifetime, you probably already have access to your own membership site where you can see other webinars, the audio bank, even long time ago webinars. But if you aren't yet with Lifetime, you can still see many, many of these replays at adoptionwebinar.com. So check that out. And if you want to talk with someone at Lifetime, just remember our number is 1-800-923-6784. And Sean and Ryan, thank you again for being with us tonight. We really, really appreciate it. Lots of favorable comments coming in right now.
You're very welcome.
Our pleasure. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dad.
We'll meet with all
everybody.
of you again very soon, and watch your email because we have another great webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. And we hope you have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.